Previously on The Fanboys.
Finally getting the monkey off their back that was the Friends Falcons.
Texas just sucks.
You don't need to be fancy to beat Maryland. Maryland needs to be fancy to beat you.
Go Tigers. Oh, take that Tiger.
Spoiler alert, everyone. Also, the Golden State Warriors are going to win the NBA Finals.
Well, let's talk about the top shit that does not stink. Clemson's going to win against A&M.
The NFL was like, did y'all miss football? And the fans are like, yeah. Then NFL is like, hold my beer.
Oh, Thursday Night Football consists of the Indianapolis Colts and the Cincinnati Bengals. Neither team are terrible, but neither team is good. Who will win in this meaningless, pointless game that has no playoff intentions? I'm actually kind of glad that a player has the balls to actually hold out from a contract. It is going to be interesting regardless of what week it comes in, week 17 or week 1, when Brett Maher misses his first field goal. We are the Fanboys. We are fans talking as fans for the fans, and we have a very special episode for you today. We've got some Twitter shout-outs. We've got SC football, as we do every single week, and we've got a college and NFL takeaway. We're going to give you our biggest impressions of what we saw this week in football, and then it is Overreaction Week 1. Why? Because NFL is back. And that's what we do best is we overreact. We have Jake. He's studied some film for us, and we're going to kind of break down the Cowboys-Carolina Panthers game, and then we're going to go right in to just talking college football, NFL football, and that's what we have in store for you today. And as always, we are the Fanboys, and let's get this thing going. Starting off with just a couple, some shout-outs. Hey, Sheldon Hawthorne, thanks for listening, man. I appreciate it. Much love. Spread the word over there at SC. Tell all the buddies that we're watching SC football and that we're talking about them. You get to hear your name on a podcast if you tune in and listen to us. That's why we do it. For you SC guys, we're staying loyal to you guys. So keep listening. Appreciate the shout-out, and remember, always interact with us on Twitter.
Yeah, and also, before we get into SC football, I want to give a quick shout-out to volleyball, men's soccer, and really all the fall sports. This is one of the best fall semesters athletically that Southwestern has had in decades. I mean, all the sports are really having a great start to their seasons. Volleyball has already won more games this year than they did last year. Soccer's 5-0 for the first time in over a decade. So a lot of exciting stuff going on with Southwestern.
Yeah, soccer had a National Player of the Week award handed out to one of their new guys, and so that's really exciting because, as we both know, soccer has not always been the most exciting or most watched or anticipated sport there on campus, and along with volleyball has had its up and downs. They are on an up season here early on, and so we're just real proud of all the SC athletics, as Jake mentioned. But yeah, big time for soccer, big upgrade from previous seasons.
Yeah, tennis as well. I know they've been really starting to just kind of reload each year, and Sheldon's part of the tennis team, and I know they expect a lot this year. And so, I just wanted to shout out all the other sports as well because we care about you guys too, and we're really excited that you're doing the college well.
Yeah, and so let's get right into it. SC football, Jake, you are terrible luck for our builders, making it to the game and broadcasting the game. So I don't ever want you to actually go to another game because they this is a new word that I learned here at the radio station for football ass beatings, mollywopped, and the Southwestern Mound Builders got mollywopped by the Sterling Warriors. And Jake, just kind of go through what you saw and why you will never be attending another game there.
Well, first off, before we start calling me a bad luck charm, let's put it into perspective that Sterling is by far the best team that they have played this year. If you want a frame of reference, Friends was losing to Kansas Wesleyan at halftime, 69-0 at halftime.
Made national news.
And
Made
then
national news.
It was 83-0 for the final. So, you don't want to look at that too much if you're Southwestern. But basically, my takeaways from the game is this team is a better version of what we saw when we were there. They're definitely a lot better than those teams, but they still lack consistency. They still shoot themselves in the foot a lot. I mean, this game, penalties, turnovers, a silly safety off of a bad snap. Whenever they got a chance to shoot themselves in the foot, they did. And the O-line was inconsistent. I know Yuli, the left tackle, went down. It didn't look good. I don't know what the word on him is, but it definitely didn't look good. And it was a team that lingered in the game with what I thought was a pretty good Sterling team. And even though they lost week 1, I was still really impressed. Their quarterback, Butler, he was a stud. That was one of the better players I've seen in the KCAC. And it was nice that they were able to stay in it, but if they turn over the ball like that, it's going to be a long season. The first 2 games, they protected the ball pretty well. That game was a disaster. Gordon had 3 picks, a fumble. Then he got replaced. They had a safety, and I think there was another fumble because I'm pretty sure they turned it over 5 times. Really, the safety to me is a turnover, so it's basically 6 turnovers.
Yeah.
When you do that and you're playing a team that's good and hungry, you're never going to win. And that was really the story of the game, was self-inflicted mistakes.
Yeah, and anyone who goes to Southwestern knows the score already, but for those who couldn't tune into the game or is curious, 43-20 was the loss that the Southwestern Mound Builders took. But a lot of it did happen in the second quarter. 21 points for the Sterling College Warriors, 21 in the second quarter. Going into half, you have to finish quarters and halves strong. You've got to finish each quarter strong. And if it's not even a quarter, you've got to finish the halves strong. If you can go into halftime hanging your hat on something, on a score or something like that, getting your guys pumped up going into the locker room instead of feeling already defeated into the locker room at half, that is such a big deal. I think it goes understated for how important it's kind of like a 2-for-1 opportunity in basketball. If you're receiving in the second half, you want to score right at the end of the first half, and you get that ball back. It's like going for 2-for-1 in basketball. And if you allow 21 points in any quarter, it's probably not a recipe for success. But other than that, Southwestern took an early lead. They had a good drive, 7-drive, 38 yards off of the first drive of the game for Southwestern. And it is what it is. They came out ready to play, but it just was too much to handle in the second quarter, and that's how Sterling really got the W. And defense was probably on the field way too often, as Jake mentioned, with those 6 turnovers. You can't tire out your defense, and that is what Southwestern has continually done in the past 7-8 years, is just keeping that defense on the field way too long with a short field.
Yeah, and, it was unfortunate because Sterling just has so many athletes on the field offensively. You can only contain them for so long. But, I was disappointed the fact that the offense and defense just could, the turnover, shooting yourselves in the foot. And then the other thing, and even Brad Griffin pointed it out in the postgame, and I pointed it out during the game, was they never complimented each other. When the offense went down and got a score or drove the ball in flip field position, the defense would let up. When the defense would make a stop, the offense would make a mistake. They were never synced up. The offense came out first drive of the second half, scored a touchdown, and then what does the defense do? They give it right back up. They could never get in sync in that game, and it was just one of those games. And now we're really going to see what this Builder team is in these next couple weeks. Are they going to be able to beat a McPherson team they should beat on the road? A McPherson team that is improved, but still a team they should beat. We're really going to see what this team is now. We've seen them play against, some bottom-tier teams. Now we've seen them play against a top-tier team, a game where they played really sloppy. And they definitely showed they could compete with a team like the Warriors. But to do so, they're going to have to complement each other, and they're going to have to take care of the ball.
Yeah, and one thing with Southwestern is that they have sometimes played to their opponent's level. Not always on the high end of things, but definitely I've always thought that Southwestern should never be at the bottom of the KCAC. I never thought talent-wise we were that bad. I always thought that we just never showed up to, like you said, the McPhersons, the Bethels of the world, the teams that Southwestern should be on an annual basis, and that's, I think, going to be a telling sign for this year's team going into McPherson. Can they win that game, a game that they're supposed to win, that they're favored to win, and come out on top and look impressive and do exactly what they're supposed to do? Because I think that has been a lingering problem for Southwestern, as well as all the other issues that you and I have touched base on here, going from like we keep mentioning in the past probably 8-7 years.
Yep, exactly. I don't have anything else to add on to that. I mean, I think we both agree on the issues and the good things about this team, and now it's kind of a wait and see moving forward.
Yeah, so Jake, let's go ahead and move on to other college sports. We have one takeaway from each college and NFL, and Jake, I'm going to let you go ahead with your college takeaway, and then I'll say mine, and then we'll just kind of flip-flop that way.
All right. Tua Tagovailoa is going to win the Heisman. That dude, he's like a better version, left-handed version of Johnny Manziel. He is, God, I wish he didn't play for Bama. He's dynamite.
He's probably not a
every
virgin.
play. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
he's probably not a virgin.
Yeah,
but I
he's
see
not
what
like
you're
Tim
saying.
Tebow.
I see what you're saying.
He's not like Tim Tebow. Even though he's a lefty, he's definitely not like Tim Tebow. He's skinny, probably not a virgin. Even though I don't buy that Tim Tebow's a virgin, I just don't.
Anyway,
but yeah, I mean that dude. Alabama's never had a quarterback like this, and now because of that, Alabama scares me more this year than any other year ever. I mean, this guy is dynamite. He's already a Heisman candidate. I think he might be the best player in college football this year, and I think he has a very, very good chance to win the Heisman. Early on, he's my Heisman winner as of right now, and I hate to say that, but he's too good to just ignore it just because he plays for a team I hate.
Right. And so my takeaway, so I went down to Huntsville this weekend, and we went to go kind of tailgate and kind of hang out on campus at Sam Houston. It's an FCS school. You probably heard of it. They've had a very successful football program for probably the last 5 years, being highly ranked in the FCS games, and really every single year losing to North Dakota State in the playoffs. So, that kind of shows you where they're at in their football program. Well, I went down there this weekend, and we kind of hung out, drinking some beers and having a good time at the bars, watching some games, so getting a little tipsy before kickoff starts off and having a good time. And then, so I'm not really watching too much football. I'm stuffing my face with wings and beer and all that fun stuff. So we go up there, I get a ticket, we go to the student section, we're hanging out with all the college kids, and it's a fun atmosphere. Well, 5 minutes into warm-ups, I mean, it is a downpour of rain. No lightning in the area, but just a downpour of rain. So we're soaked before the game even starts. Game gets going, flag, turnover, flag. Just a sloppy game for both teams, for Prairie View A&M and for Sam Houston. And then we get stuck in a 30-minute lightning delay right in the kind of the middle to the late part of the first quarter. So then that takes about 45 minutes for all the players to get back in, and then back to being warmed up, and then going back off to where they left off. This game was so slow. The first half, we got there at 6 o'clock. The kickoff was 6 o'clock. We got out of there at halftime. JC and I left. It was 9 o'clock by the time we left, and we were drenched, soaking wet. The score was actually a good game. The game was good score-wise, but it was just a bad game to watch. The score was close. It remained close. Sam Houston ended up winning. But 3 hours. The Texas Longhorn game started an hour after the Sam Houston game had started, and the Longhorns were in the middle of the third quarter by the time the halftime had even started for the Sam Houston game. So that was my experience. So we left at halftime. I was miserable being in wet clothes the whole time. They're not like my favorite team. It's not like we spent, she got in for free. And so, she was a student there, so she got in for free. General admission was like $15. So I was like, you know what? I'm good. I've had my fill. It's time to go home. We had an hour drive back home anyway. So we got to stay for the entire length of what an actual game should be, but we only got to see the first half. So that was my takeaway from college football this last week.
That's I mean, that kind of explains week 2, like we mentioned, just not many great matchups. And really, there was only about 1 or 2 games that turned out to be worth watching at all. So I'm definitely glad I chose to go up to Southwestern because I really wouldn't even actually watch much football because there's just too many terrible matchups.
Yeah, and so let's move on to the NFL. Something that was very exciting this week that happened was week 1 of the NFL season. What was your biggest takeaway from that?
I mean, it's also overreaction week. I want to, make sure and mention that before I mention my takeaway. The Rams and the Vikings are the best 2 teams in the NFL, and I don't know if it's going to be that close. I watched a lot of football this weekend, and I mean, wow, I was really impressed by both unfortunately, the Rams. I mean, we kind of talked about them in our pre-show, and I mean, they just look stacked. They're just stacked everywhere. They played terrible the first half, and it didn't matter because all they have to do is play one half of football, and they're probably still going to beat most teams in the NFL. I mean, they are just stacked full of talent on the defense. You got Todd Gurley. Jared Goff looks like he's picking up where he left off. They got a ton of talent at receiver. They don't really have a weak spot. Their offensive line played great. Unless they get injuries or, the locker room blows up with all those personalities, and it's going to be hard for the locker room to blow up when you're winning. I just don't see them falling apart unless something very bizarre happens, which is possible. And then the Vikings, I mean, Kirk Cousins looked exactly like we thought he would. Very good.
Yes. Yes.
They're going to have a good running game. They are the first team ever to beat Jimmy Garoppolo, and their defense looked great. I mean, the Vikings and the Rams are right now, early on, in my opinion, are in a different tier than the rest of the NFL. But I do think the other NFL teams are going to catch up because overall it was pretty sloppy football, but that's how it is whenever you have less padded practices, people are playing less people in preseason, you're going to get sloppy week 1 football, and that's what we got from a lot of teams that I expect to be a lot better moving forward.
Yeah, I'd give it about halfway through October, maybe even a little earlier than that, to really get these teams up and running and going. Probably first week of October. It's usually whenever the pink gloves and the pink shoes start coming out. That's when you get some really good football, and that's really when you get to see which teams are made of what and which teams are legit and which teams are frauds. My NFL takeaway was just bad quarterback play from some pretty good names. It's the names that are hyped up. It's the names that are supposed to be the top, maybe not the top tier, not the Rodgers, the Breezes, or the Bradys, but right below that. The Ben Roethlisbergers, the Matt Staffords, the Brandon Carrs, and Jimmy G. Garoppolo's supposed to be up there. He's getting hyped up to be up there. Dak had a bad game. Mariota played terrible for the Tennessee Titans, but just bad quarterback play. I mean, I think between Carr, Stafford, Garoppolo, and Big Ben, I think there was probably close to 15 interceptions between those 4 guys. I don't think it's that much, but it was like 10 interceptions between all those guys, and it's just bad quarterback play, and I'm not exactly sure with all the NFL rules, with protecting the quarterback and making the offense, the rules surround the offense for them to score a lot of points. Defense completely dominated these quarterbacks in the first week. And like you said, the kinks will get worked out. But just to come out and play that bad for Stafford against a Jets team that is not supposed to be very good and getting completely outdone by the youngest quarterback to ever start a football game, and then Big Ben against Cleveland. I know Cleveland has had like 20 straight years of top 3 picks with picking either a quarterback or a defensive player, so they're supposed to have some kind of talent on defense. But, dude, that was bad. It was ugly for a lot of quote-unquote star premier franchise quarterbacks. And Dak, we'll get into that a little bit more. I'm not picking on Dak right now. I will do plenty of that later on in the show, picking on Dak. But he didn't see the field well. He missed open guys that not just throwing, he just missed them by seeing them. And so that was my biggest NFL takeaway, was just the horrible quarterback play, except for the select few of Breeze and Rodgers and a few other guys that we're going to touch base on a little later.
Yeah, and let me add one point onto that. Unless you are the Buffalo Bills, no fan base should be panicking. It's week 1. I mean,
Yeah.
I just want to say that right now because Roethlisberger, Stafford, those guys aren't going to suck the rest of the year. And unless you are a Buffalo Bills fan, because I'm sorry, but your team's going to suck very badly.
They're going to be the number one pick in the draft.
They're going to be
number
the
one pick in the draft.
without a doubt, in my opinion. But
They could go 0-16.
unless you are a Buffalo Bills fan, if you're listening to this podcast and your team lost week 1, take a breath. It's week 1. Week 1, it matters, but it really doesn't. Because your team right now is going to look completely different in 4 weeks. In most likely a positive way.
So, with that being said, of not to overreact to week 1, it's time for Overreaction Week 1 edition. It's go time. I'm just going to get this thing started, Jake. And I got Fitzmagic in me. Coming on the Saints secondary. Fitzmagic, magic, magic. Fitzmagic, magic, magic. Dude, that dude, Fitzmagic from Harvard, destroyed the New Orleans Saints. I mean, he completely just came all over the secondary, just destroyed them. And for your take for the Buccaneers, them coming out the way they did in week 1, now I realize they will probably never have a game like that this season. You know, they won't have another game like that. But I'm going to overreact to Fitzmagic, and I am going to ride the train and say this, that he will play well enough through these 4 games of Jameis Winston's suspension where Jameis Winston will not start unless Fitzpatrick either A, throws 5 interceptions in a game, or B, gets hurt. He will be the starter for the remainder of the season if he continues to play the way he did week 1.
Sometimes I wonder why I'm friends with you. God.
Hey,
God.
dude, I thought that was pretty
no,
good.
It was good, but I don't need to hear you sing. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and go with my first point then, Tanner, because I think it plays right off of yours. The New Orleans defense is back. They're back to their glory
They're on their
days.
backs.
Fitzpatrick is due for one of those every other year so he can continue to get good contracts, even though he shouldn't. And then everyone's like, oh, yeah, he's from Harvard. He's smart. He's good. And then he doesn't do anything the rest of the year. I mean, I do think the Bucs are going to be a little bit better than I predicted, but if they put Winston back in, I think they'll go right back to sucking because I think Winston is terrible, and he is worse than Fitzpatrick. But poor Drew Brees, they teased him last year, man. They got him all worked up. They got him all excited, and then they just left him.
They got
there.
him looking all nice for date night.
They
left his makeup on.
They should give him a blue jersey during practice because they basically gave him blue balls. I mean, their defense is going to go back to sucking this year. That was an embarrassing performance. And I know they started the year slow last year, but they did lose some guys defensively in the offseason, and that was an embarrassment of a first game at home to have Fitzpatrick have what would be a career day for a Hall of Fame quarterback against you. No, I mean, I'm not buying into the Bucs being good, but hey, I think we found our team that's going to flop in that division because we mentioned that in the first episode. Someone in that division is going to have to flop. Well, there you go. It's going to be the Aints because that was terrible.
So going on to number 2 for my overreaction for week 1, and this may not even be an overreaction, but don't at me on this on Twitter because that was Aaron Rodgers' best performance of his entire career, and he is the GOAT. He is the greatest quarterback to ever play the game on a pure talent skill basis. Now, if you're going to go with wins and you're going to go with successfulness per season, win percentage, yes, it is obviously Tom Brady. But Aaron Rodgers, skill-wise, no quarterback in the history of the game compares to what that man did on Sunday Night Football, pretty much breaking his ankle, knee, tearing his whatever he did to his leg, coming back out there Paul Pierce style, Boston Celtics, and winning the game on a 21 point or 20-point comeback, some shit like that. Incredible. Don't at me on it. His best performance of his career and one of the best performances I've seen in my entire life against a defense who was dominating. Now, don't say, oh, it was just the Bears defense. That defense was completely destroying them. With Rodgers in the lineup, they were killing them. He came back in the second half and said that he knew that's when they were going to win the game. When he came out in the second half, he had locked the game up. It was over. It was Kobe slashing the throat, Paul Pierce coming in to the Garden after a wheelchair incident or whatever it was that he did. Aaron Rodgers is the greatest quarterback of all time on a pure skill standpoint. Don't at me. His best performance of his entire career was Sunday night.
That's not even to me. That's not even a debate as far as pure quarterback, and he's never really had a great team around him. He's the GOAT in my opinion. And yeah, that performance was amazing. And also a point on the Bears. The Bears are going to be a good team this year. That defense is legit. I think Trubisky showed he can do some stuff. I think the Bears are going to be a lot better team than people realize. So I think that was a really good matchup. I mean, I look forward to watching the rematch of that one.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think that whole division, except for actually the Lions, and speaking of flops per division, the Lions could have definitely flopped. But go ahead with your second one, Jake.
Yeah, AC/DC's dead. Amari Cooper and Derek Carr. I'm not talking, they're not back in black. Unless you're wearing black for their funeral, that's about it. That was terrible. Derek, I know he threw for like 300 yards. He threw 3 picks. They were all ugly, and all of his completions were just quick little West Coast style. And, I predicted it at the start of the year was Derek Carr will never be the same. He will be the Carson Palmer. And so far, thank you, Derek Carr. You're proving me right. That wasn't a good performance. Amari Cooper had a really bad year last year. He's showing no signs of speeding up. He drops the ball a lot. He didn't really get many passes attempted to him. I was not impressed, and I really think and it's kind of a shame because that was a fun thing. The AC/DC, they play for the Raiders, back in black.
Oh, yeah.
But we got to stop. I will no longer, from this point on, call them that name unless I'm talking about the band, because it's a disgrace to great rock music to call them AC/DC.
Hey, and I think you couldn't be more spot on about the John Gruden prediction that we had in our first episode. John Gruden is dead in the water.
Yeah, it was fun to watch him on the field and stuff, just from like a fun perspective. But they played all right in the first half. You can at least tell he got his ideal of being a physical football team across, because they were physical in the first half, and it did catch the Rams off guard. But at the end of the day, the team with the better talent won, and that's going to happen when you trade away the best defensive player in the NFL. Khalil Mack on Sunday Night Football, he had a strip fumble, I think a fumble recovery, a pick, a touchdown, and a sack. And only one other player in NFL history has ever done that, and that was Khalil Mack in 2016. You don't trade that. I would have given up 6 first-round picks and my left nut to get Khalil Mack.
No, yeah. I would rather be Lance Armstrong right now and have Khalil Mack on my team than not have him at all. So I'm just going to kind of move on. My third and final overreaction to Week 1, and I think it's probably my biggest overreaction, Deshaun Watson is going to be the next RG3. I think his injury, he's had 2 now. ACLs, by the way. He had 1 in college. People forget that. People don't forget. But Deshaun Watson, he may not be able to return to that MVP caliber type quarterback that people were so ecstatic to overreact on in his first season, his rookie year. And I know he's playing the Patriots. I realize that, people. I know he's playing the Patriots. I don't care. It didn't look good. He looked kind of hesitant. He didn't look like he was really ready to go out there and play, and he kind of looked skittish, a lot like an RG3 did. Now, I'm not going to say he's going to be a journeyman and go, from team to team to being out of the league for a year. I'm not saying to that extent, but he will not be the same player that we saw his rookie year for those 6 weeks that he had magical performances.
Yeah, he's going to be the what if. For the rest of his career, very possibly. And on your point about the Patriots Patriots defense isn't anything to ever brag about, especially at the start of years. They always get blasted in the first weeks. And, I mean, their defense was bad all of last year. Their defense is the reason they lost the Super Bowl. If I'm the Texans right now, I'm very, very concerned that you finally thought you had your quarterback, and now he could still be serviceable, but I would be very concerned about him ever being that elite level again, because it is hard, especially on that style of quarterback, to come back from all those ACL injuries. And we may never get to know if he could have stayed at that level because of these injuries, and we still don't even know if he's going to stay healthy. But that was not an inspiring performance whatsoever.
No, and you've already mentioned David Carr or Derek Carr, whichever he is, Carson Palmer. These guys just not everybody. Everybody thinks after what Adrian Peterson did, recovering from his ACL, everybody thinks they're going to have an Adrian Peterson type recovery. That doesn't happen. That's an anomaly. Adrian Peterson was a different breed of animal back in his prime. No one touches that guy in terms of ACL tears. No, that doesn't happen. Everybody thinks it can happen now because he did it. It doesn't happen like that, especially with quarterbacks. All the throwing power, it comes from your legs anyway. It doesn't come from your arm. So people who think it's just a leg injury, if he stays in the pocket, he'll be fine. No, all that motion, it comes from your legs. That's where all your power comes from. So if you're just lollipopping it in the middle of the field or down long, that's going to be a pick more times than not in the NFL. And you've got to have that leg strength. You've talked about Carson Palmer with that same injury, David Carr with that same injury. It's not easy to come back from, and that's why the Eagles are taking as much time as they are with Carson Wentz. There's no reason to bring him back before he's ready. Carson Wentz may not be the same player when he comes back. He probably won't be.
Yeah, and especially a quarterback like Deshaun Watson, where that's part of what made him so good. Was he making great passes? Yes, but his escapability and his ability to tuck it and run, and the defenses having to respect that, is part of what made him so great. It's part of what made RG3 so great his rookie year. When that ability goes away, things become a lot harder. And I like Deshaun Watson. I hope he can return to some type of, Pro Bowl-like form, but it's not looking great, and we'll have to, monitor as the season goes on. But it is overreaction week, but I would be seriously concerned if I was a Texans fan that he never returns to that form again.
Yeah, and Jake, you have another young quarterback you want to overreact about. Tell us a little bit what you thought of Jets' new quarterback on Monday Night Football.
Yes, I'm liking to use my preseason predictions because so far I'm feeling good about a lot of them. I mean, other than the Chargers, but I don't want to talk about that. Sam Darnold. Goes out there, throws a pick six his first play. Thank God we don't have thousands of listeners or something, because I would have just been getting absolutely roasted at that point. But to have the composure as a rookie who's the youngest player to ever start, to come back from that and have the game that he had is very impressive. And if I'm a Jets fan, I'm very excited. He showed why he was the third overall pick. He showed why some people had him as their number one quarterback on the board. He showed that playmaking ability. He showed he has the arm. He has the smarts. I know they said he learned the playbook in like a week or something ridiculous. He doesn't seem like your typical USC quarterback, and I think that's why I kind of like him. Seems to have a pretty good head on his shoulders. Very appreciative of his parents. Kind of a pretty level-headed guy, and I never thought I'd be a fan of a USC quarterback, but I think I'm on the Sam Darnold fan bus, and it's pretty easy to as well, because I would love to see someone new take over that division eventually over the Patriots, and I think the Jets might finally have that guy, and it's overreaction week. So you know what? Screw it. Sam Darnold's going to be a great potential Hall of Fame quarterback. Let's go with it. I'm on the train. I'm on the hype train.
Oh, wow. Okay, Mike Greenberg. Take a chill pill on the Hall of Fame speech for the New York Jets. Although I will admit, it is exciting for, even if it's not your team, it's exciting for teams that have never had great quarterback play finally get someone with some potential, like the Texans and Deshaun Watson. Like Sam Darnold with the Jets, with the hype around Baker Mayfield with the Cleveland Browns. It almost feels like something's wrong, like something's not quite right, like it shouldn't be happening, but it is exciting, and so we'll keep an eye out on that. So that's going to do it for Overreaction Week. We are probably still going to overreact. We'll still make some predictions, but let's talk a little bit, tiny baby bit about some college football. I don't want to spend too much time on this, Jake, because it was such a shitty week for college football, and NFL was here for week 1, and there's a lot to talk about there. But our Longhorns, we can't go a show without mentioning them, had a 21-point lead over Tulsa and nearly lost it. Ended up winning by 7. It was 28-21, I think. I don't even know if I watched the rest of the game. But Longhorns did not look good for the second week in a row against an opponent that should really be beaten by about 30 or 40 points if you're the Longhorns. I'm not saying Tulsa's a pushover. I'm not saying Tulsa's bad because they're a quality opponent for a week 2. However, if you're the University of Texas and you're preseason ranked in the top 25, you should beat a Tulsa team by 30 or 40 points. It was not a very inspirational performance by the Longhorns or made them fans look or seem comfortable with Coach Herman. It just didn't look very good for the Texas Longhorns. Although they put up big numbers, they couldn't get the ball in the end zone, and that's the number one thing you got to do. Also, you kill yourself a little bit, but the Longhorns might be in hot water, and I'm looking for a blowout in Austin this upcoming week against USC.
Please don't say that because I'm going to be at that game, and I'm trying to hold some hope for it. But I do want to bring up one thing. So obviously, you said it. You want to beat Tulsa by more. At the end of the day, you got to win on the books. I mean, it's the same as if you won 50-0. If they go out and get blown out by USC, then this is just going to be a consistent problem. I want to see if they get up for the big game like they did last year. I'm going to give them this opportunity, but I do want to bring up one thing. Herbstreit said, I think 2 years ago on College Game Day, about his worry about Texas becoming a program that no one would want to coach for because they're just going to start going through new coaches every year. It was when they were talking about firing Charlie Strong, and he's like, whoever they bring in next, they'll probably push him away after a year or two if they don't immediately turn it around. This is a message to all Texas fans. Let's not do that. Give Herman some time. Rome was not built in a day. And I know that's not what you want to hear because it's been a long time since we've seen Texas football do well. But you know who was the last successful season was? If last year was okay, but the last 8+ win season was Mac Brown's last year. His last year. So when we fired him, let's not just start recycling coaches every year. Let's give Herman 4 years. I mean, give him 4 years. Let him get his recruits in. Let him get his recruits through because Charlie Strong handed him a mess. I don't care what Charlie Strong's recruiting classes were ranked. He didn't get offensive linemen, and the offensive linemen that he had, he kicked off campus. So they have no offensive line. And when you don't have an offensive line, you're not going to blow out teams because you're not going to dominate up front, even against a Tulsa. And that's exactly what their problem has been these first 2 weeks. They're not winning the battle up front. They lost a lot of guys from defense last year. Please, let's not push to get Herman fired. I'm not saying I'm a believer in him. I don't know what I am. All I am is let's give him time before we just start recycling coaches every other year and fall into this trap where we just stay a mediocre program. Give a coach some time. Give him 3 or 4 years at least and see if the improvement's there. And not only that, but this year's not over. If you go out and you beat USC, everything's forgotten about, at least for now.
Yeah, and my thing is a lot of people want to mention the quarterback position. What do they have at quarterback? Why can't they get a QB? Well, and the real down to knowledgeable Longhorn fans that know what real successful Longhorn football has been all about is, yes, Vince Young and Colt McCoy, they stole the show because they are quarterbacks, but where's our Ricky Williams? Where's our Cedric Benson? Where's our Ramonce Taylors? Where are our running backs at? That we had Foreman, but Foreman's not the kind of guy that's gonna lead a team and carry the team on his back. And I know it's this day and age with the spread offenses, but where are our running backs? You can't rotate 3 or 4 guys and only give those 3 or 4 guys 5 carries a game. You can't do. No one's going to be able to get in a rhythm. You need an all-around, do-it-all back. You need a stud back there that's going to cause some attention to help the passing game at the end of the day. And along with the coaching thing that you said, Jake, I wanted to put in my running back input because we haven't had a good running back in a while, except for Foreman is the exception, but he had one good year and then left, and we didn't have a team around him. However, with Charlie Strong, the most important thing as a coach, for if you're going to coach a huge program like Texas, it's the same for Scott Frost at Nebraska, it's the same for Jimbo at A&M, you cannot stay mediocre for 3 or 4 years. You have to at least gradually improve by maybe a game and a half, something, and then win your bowl game. You have to win your bowl games. You have to get to a bowl game with 7 wins, 8 wins, whatever it takes, and then win that bowl game. You can't go in and then lose a bowl game. And however unfair this seems to a lot of fans or to just the average listener, is you have to beat your rivals. That is something that I don't, and that's something Charlie Strong actually did pretty well at against Oklahoma, is he beat Oklahoma, but you have to beat Oklahoma. USC isn't a conference rival, and they haven't played in a while, except for the exception of last year. That's a rival. You have to beat these teams that are historically linked to your program.
Especially at home.
Like, maybe not, especially at home. And it sounds completely unfair, but you've got to win those rivalries. Fans care about that. Alumni care about that. That's college football for you. And speaking of A&M and Jimbo Fisher and Dabo Sweeney.
Wait.
Go ahead.
One more
Yeah,
point
go
on
ahead.
that.
Go ahead.
First off, I'm still really excited for the game. I think it's going to be a fun atmosphere. Second off, what I said about Herman, it goes with the quarterback too. Colt McCoy was terrible his sophomore year. He took off his junior year. Give Ellinger time. Don't just start benching quarterbacks every other year. Bouchel looked okay.
Yeah.
Then he struggled his second year. Then we benched him. Are we going to do the same thing with Ellinger? Give him time. Let him develop. At this point, you know you're not going to the college football playoff this year. You know you're probably not going to make a New Year's Six bowl. So give players and give the coaches a chance to develop through this year, and then next year let's see the improvement. Let's just make it a goal this year. Make a bowl game, win your bowl game, try to knock off 1 or 2 of your rivals. Set the standards low this year, and then I think you start setting the standards higher this year. But give this year, please, just give the quarterback, give the coaches, give them time to develop this year.
Yeah, the worst thing that happened was these freshman quarterbacks coming in, like Johnny Manziel and these freshman quarterbacks that are in the Heisman race. These are the quarterbacks that are making Texas actually struggle because fans want an immediate successor. They want it to be immediate, and they're starving for a great quarterback at Texas, and I understand that. But, Jake, I couldn't agree with you more, is that you can't get stuck in a Cleveland Browns situation and just rotating your quarterbacks in and out. You just can't do that. You can't eat a quarterback and then just shit him out in 2 years and expect the next guy you eat up to do the same. You just can't get stuck in that routine, and that's so vital. And, Jake, I'm glad you touched on that.
Don't forget their
let's go ahead and move
kids. on. That's the last thing.
Yeah. Well, they also got to, if they're 20-year-old kids, you got to come out like a 20-year-old, pumped up, excited to play football, not like it's some business trip. But that's for another day. Clemson A&M it was actually a much better game. I will go on record and say I was completely proven wrong. I thought Clemson was going to mop the floor with A&M on Kyle Field. I thought it wasn't going to be close. I thought it was a terrible matchup. But I will say this for A&M. Thank God that the Aggies have Jimbo Fisher, because that man knows how to coach against Dabo Sweeney. I know he has lost like 4 out of the last 5 or 3 of the last 4, something like that, but he always gives Clemson, whether it be at Florida State or wherever he's at, a run for their money. And he's actually one of the few coaches that have beaten Dabo Sweeney, I think 4 or 5 times in his coaching career, and he just knows what he's doing. They just came up short and probably should have won the game.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give A&M the credit. I mean, they are a hard place to play at. I've been to a game there. They have a great environment. It's one of the few things I'll give A&M. I mean, if you're an A&M fan, you should be excited about Jimbo so far, but you also don't want to overreact to it. We're still kind of learning how good Clemson is too, but hey, props to A&M. They went out there, they played hard, they came up short, but it'll be interesting to see how they do the rest of the year with Jimbo Fisher because, it's a loss, but and A&M fans, it is kind of funny because they'll always get most excited over a close loss, but or Alabama winning since all they care about is the SEC. But if you're an A&M fan, I can at least understand being somewhat excited. After that game.
Yeah, Jake, and I don't want to go too far into it. I didn't get to watch a lot of the game because, again, the Sam Houston game took so long and didn't really get to watch a lot of it. Was keeping up with it on my phone and stuff, but they fought back too. I think that's what's so important is that they were trailing by a significant lead against a number 2 team who has just put teams away. When they get a 2-score or 3-score lead over a team, you don't come back on a Clemson. You just don't. And the fact that A&M did that and should have won the game, that is impressive enough in itself to have me thinking that Jimbo might be he might be the guy that can get A&M some national recognition. And however, he's using Sumlin's guys to do this, which I know it's a little bit of an overreaction. At the end of the day, they have the same record as the Texas Longhorns, but 2 teams that have looked completely different, both 1-1. But right now, if you're an Aggie fan, you're feeling really confident. If you're a Longhorn fan, not so much. Let's move away from college football because that is really all that was really needed to be said. Let's go ahead and move back to the NFL. We talked about it earlier. It's overreaction week. And how about Cleveland and the Pittsburgh Steelers ending in a week 1 tie?
Yeah. If you're a Browns fan, be excited. This is your best start.
The streak is over. The losing streak is over.
This is your best start, I think they said, since 2012 or something stupid. But hey, Tyrod Taylor had apparently it was statistically the worst performance of his career, and you tied a team that's expected to be really good. If you're a Cleveland fan, it's a tie, but I think you're pretty excited. Myles Garrett looked like a monster out there, exactly what we expected him to be.
Denzel Ward,
people dogged on them for that pick. He got 2 interceptions in that game. I think if you're a Browns fan, you're optimistic and hopeful that you get some wins this year and, be that 7 or 8 win team that we've kind of discussed because I think most people, even if they thought the Browns were going to win 8 games, marked that up as a game they were going to lose for sure to Pittsburgh. And instead, they didn't win it, but they went out there. They looked a lot better than they have in a long time and at least look like they're going to be a team that's going to be able to go out there and win some games. So, congratulations, I guess, on the tie.
Yeah, well, what's crazy to me, Jake, is that, I don't know how many people actually remember this, but there was no ties in the NFL for a long time. There was a while, probably throughout the 90s and early 2000s, where there were no ties, and people kind of forgot that you could tie in the NFL. And then it was the Donovan McNabb. I think it was it the Eagles, and it was like Cleveland or somebody. I don't remember who they were playing against. Maybe the Rams. It was some weird team, but the Philadelphia Eagles tied in a game because they didn't kick a field goal or they couldn't get into range or something happened to where they could have won the game. They ended up not doing it because they thought they were going into double overtime. It ends in a tie. There is no double overtime unless you're in the playoffs in the NFL. And Donovan McNabb goes into his press conferences like, yeah, we would have done this a whole lot different had we known that it was possible to tie. I didn't even know you could do that in the
Just
NFL.
Give me my
and ever since that,
noodle soup.
Right. Thanks, Grandma, Nana, or Mama, whatever he fucking called her. But yeah, I just remember those really annoying Super Bowl ads with him in it. But yeah, it was. And then ever since then, Jake, there's been maybe not a tie every season. There wasn't one last season, but there's at least one every 3 years ever since Donovan McNabb came out and said he didn't know there were ties. There have been a handful of them in the last, 10 years or so.
Yeah, no, I've noticed that too. And it'll be, Le'Veon Bell tweeted out his little emoji after, but his replacement had just as good of a game as Bell would have had.
Would have had the best running back performance in week 1. So literally could not have done better than what he did.
Yeah. So, that's not a Le'Veon Bell issue, and people are just quick to say that without actually looking at the game. Roethlisberger played bad. I mean, that was really a big story of it. But the Steelers are going to have some issues this year. I think that showed in week 1. And if Roethlisberger, if this is the year where he starts hitting his decline, the division becomes up for grabs. I mean, the Ravens look good week 1, but they played the Browns or the Bills, so I don't look.
The Bills.
They look so bad. I called them the Browns, the past couple of years. But
it's all the same.
Yeah, I mean, that division, the AFC, could be really bad because the Steelers were that team you were figuring was going to be the first or second best team in the AFC. That was not a good week for them. But at the same time, if you're a Browns fan, you got to be excited.
Yeah, and so the other game that we were going to talk about, and this is probably going to take up the rest of the show, so get ready. It is time for Jake's film breakdown of the Dallas Cowboys and the Carolina Panthers. And this is probably a segment that we're going to bring fairly often because we are such big Cowboy fans. We're going to get all of the other NFL, all the other headlines out of the way first, and then we're probably going to end the show off with this segment. And however long it lasts, that's how long it lasts. There is no time limit for what we're about to talk about because it is the Cowboys. We could go on for another hour. Probably not going to see that happening. But Jake, tell us a little bit what you've seen on your breakdown and footage. You've got some coaches' film that you have, and just kind of go through. I don't know if you need to go through the entire game,
No.
but just some points that you want to shout out.
So first off, I want to make this offer as long as we don't all of a sudden start getting a huge audience where they're all requesting it. But hey, if if you're listening to this podcast and you want me to look at the film of your team, just ask me, and I'll do a breakdown for them that week rather than the Cowboys, because I'd be happy to do that, and I want people that are listening to, be able to have the power to kind of add a segment to the show. So I kind of wanted to offer that because I still think that'd be fun because I just love football, and I don't care what teams I'm watching. So this year I subscribed to the NFL Game Pass because I wanted to be able to watch the coaches' film of especially Cowboy games to see what's going on in a game, because when you watch on TV, you're really only seeing half of the picture because you're really just seeing the ball. You're not going to see all the blocking schemes necessarily. You're definitely not going to see what the receivers are doing on their routes. And, on the defensive side of the ball, you're not seeing if it's just the offensive team, screwing up, or if the defense is playing good, or vice versa. So I kind of dived into the Cowboys tape these last couple days since the game, and the offense looked bad as we talked about. So I kind of want to start out with the good, and that's the defensive side of the ball. First off, DeMarcus Lawrence, best player on the field. Between both teams, pay that man. I am all aboard now. I mean, as long as he, consistently looks decent the rest of the year, I'm all aboard the paid DeMarcus Lawrence train. That dude dominated the game. On plays where he wasn't getting tackles, he was affecting the play. He never was a liability on the field. He was doing what you expect a superstar defensive end to do. And the Cowboys defense as a whole, I mean, we thought and we were hopeful this was going to be the most fast and athletic and fun to watch defense we've seen in years. Well, so far, one weekend, they've lived up to it. The only play that was beating them was when Cam would use his legs. And I think they just overreacted to Norv Turner becoming the offensive coordinator and thought maybe they weren't going to run him as much. And I think that caught them by surprise when maybe it shouldn't. But overall, there can be no complaints against this defense. Byron Jones in his debut, returning to the corner spot with Chris Richard coaching him. A great performance by him. He was locked down coverage all night. He was able to press. He was able to back off. He showed great range along the field. He did a good job with his eyes, but not putting himself in a bad position. Chidobe Awuzie as well. Anthony Brown, after having, a shaky preseason game or two, looked strong. And a big shout out to Kayvon Frazier. I was really impressed with his play, and, safety position I'd say was what most Cowboy fans are probably, worried about on the defensive side of the ball. And my overall take of the defense is if Sean Lee was arguably your worst player on the field in a game and your defense still performed great, especially a Cowboys defense, you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, and Jake, I wanted to kind of piggyback on that with the Cam Newton running, is that I think that the coaching staff has got to, and it didn't really hurt in the second half, so definitely they made some adjustments. A lot of his running came in the first half. So with that being said, that Sean Lee, you took the words right out of my mouth. If he's your biggest liability in a game, for a game, then you're pretty solid on defense, because I guarantee you in this Giants game, he will not have that same performance.
No.
He's going to bounce back. I've never seen him have a bad game and then come in and then have a repeat of another bad game. So Sean Lee's going to come back super strong in this Giants game on Sunday night. But what I saw was just way too much committing on the running back on the QB choice. And I think, like you said, they maybe weren't expecting it with Norv Turner, but it's Cam Newton. I don't care who the offensive coordinator is. You can't just fully commit an entire side of the defensive line and linebackers to crash on the running back. You've got to hold contain on the outside no matter who it is. It's that offense. You hold contain. That's how you stop it. And you've got to hold that tackle in. And because you're going to go unblocked on the end. And that was mostly Sean Lee the entire game. They mostly left Sean Lee to make the decision to crash the running back or to contain the quarterback. And he crashed the running back every time. And Cam Newton is too good to let that stop him. He's just going to pull it, and he's going to pull out, and he's going to go. He's going to come right on top of your defense. And that's exactly what happened there defensively. Now, I know offensively that you're going to get into that right now after what I say. But, Jake, I wanted to ask you, for the plays that he got in, I don't know how much you focused in on him, but I know there's a lot of questions about whether or not Leighton Vander Esch, the first-round pick, what he did defensively. And I know I saw him out there. He was there on the ball. He may not have made reads to stop the play, but he was there getting to the ball. He was getting a pad on the ball or on the ball carrier. He was making some plays, and he was always seemed to be in the right position. Maybe not always making the play, but always in the right position, and that's always a positive sign to see from your linebacker, especially a rookie.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. So I was going to talk about just a couple more guys individually that I really focused in on the film, because I knew DeMarcus Lawrence was going to be great. It was just kind of fun to watch him. But I really focused in on three guys to see what they were doing, because I was interested to see how they're going to do. Leighton Vander Esch, the first-round pick this year. Taco Charlton, the first-round pick last year. And then Tyron Crawford, a guy who – we need to do good things up front. I'll start with Leighton Vander Esch since you brought him up. Kind of, you really actually, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, he didn't make any just plays where you're like, holy cow. But for a rookie linebacker in his first start, going against an offense that does have a lot of talent, he was in the right position. He was never a liability on the field, and that was the main thing. He flowed to the ball nice. He showed his power. He didn't look like he was too slow. He didn't look like he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't look like he wasn't physical enough. He looked like a guy who's already going to be a strong rotational guy, and also exactly as advertised with coverage. Did a great job in coverage in the zone. They brought him in on some packages on third downs and second down and longs, just for coverage, and he did his job. He was, causing Newton to have to check off to a different read, and Newton never looked comfortable throwing the ball in the game because of the looks that the secondary and the linebackers were giving him in coverage. So I'd say it was a pretty impressive debut for Leighton Vander Esch, and I'm excited to see where he goes. And then with Taco Charlton, a guy who a lot of fans started overreacting and called a bust last year, he was arguably the second best end for the Cowboys in the game behind DeMarcus Lawrence. He had probably 4 or 5 hurries or rushes on the quarterback where he affected the play. He seemed to be giving the offensive lineman a lot of problems. He did really well in run blocking as well. He just seemed more disciplined than he did last year, a little bit more powerful, knows his body better. He definitely... if Taco Charlton can take improvement week from week off this week, by the end of the year, he's going to be not only a good rotational player, but a good starter. I was really impressed by Taco Charlton in week 1. And then I didn't focus too much in on Tyron Crawford because I wanted to focus in on, our 2 last first-round picks. But Tyron Crawford, he was a just absolute monster to deal with for the guard and center. They really struggled with him all game in the run game and as well as in pass blocking. Crawford and really the whole defensive line showed out to play. Even though the Cowboys lost the game, the Cowboys played pretty bad. They lost by one possession on the road to a playoff team. It's not time to overreact, especially if the defense can build off this performance.
Yeah, and Jake, I wanted to now we can really shift our attention to the offensive side of the ball, which is really where all of the questions are at. I think a lot of questions were answered on the defensive side of the ball, but on the offense, a lot of those questions have not been answered, like not even close. And my 2-3 biggest takeaways from this game was, number one, the play calling. I thought Scott Linehan did an absolute classic Scott Linehan job coaching this offense, and play calling was horrendous. There was probably 3 or 4 times throughout the game where the Cowboys were stuck behind the chains due to either a penalty, which is a lack of discipline on the player's part, or a bad play call to set them up in poor third down position on second down, or a bad incomplete pass by Dak. Going into third down, there was probably 3 or 4 different times that it was 3rd and 11, 3rd and 12, and we'd just do a slip screen. Now, I don't mind a slip screen on 3rd and 15 or 3rd and 20 just to do something, and maybe you get lucky and get a first down, but more than likely you're just setting up for better punting position. But on a 3rd and 11, and you have a quarterback who's supposedly going to be your franchise guy, who's in his 3rd year, which is a huge year, a huge step for young quarterbacks, and you can't throw it 10 yards down the field and try to get a first down. Come on, you got to throw past the sticks, man. You have got to throw past the sticks. Every now and then I don't mind a slip screen to throw them off, but if they see it coming because you've ran it 5 times already, it's not going to work. Second thing I wanted to talk about was, and I know I know you have already done this. You don't need to say anything to me. But Connor Williams did struggle. However, he had one of the greatest, most underrated and underappreciated nose guards over the top of him in that game with Kawan Short. But I know the offensive line didn't necessarily play as great as a lot of people want them to. And the one guy that really stood out to me in a bad way, and it wasn't the rookie, it wasn't the replacement at center, it was Tyron Smith. He had a couple bad penalties and allowed the edge rusher, usually Julius Peppers, which that guy's a Hall of Famer, first ballot anyway, but so is Tyron Smith in my opinion. And Tyron Smith should be in his prime and should be able to handle a Julius Peppers. However, I thought he struggled. He didn't have a very great game. And then I also want to ask you, lastly, and yes, I know you're going to bring up Dak. He missed open guys, but how did Michael Gallup look as well? Was he getting open and Dak just wasn't able to get him the ball? And then the snap, I thought the snap counts for this receiving group was a little telling and a little odd, and I don't know if it's going to go that way week to week because Tavon Austin only got 10 plays on offense, and Terrence Williams, who has been the second guy, only got 19 the entire game. And so I'm going to leave this off to you. It's your segment, Jake, but that's kind of the questions that I have, and I'm going to let you take over.
Let's start with your last one. It's about, Gallup and the receivers. Really, there's a mixture throughout the game. There was times where receivers weren't getting open, and then there was times where Dak missed some reads, but there was also a lot of the times where there was pressure right in Dak's face, and you don't really get a great chance to throw it upfield because even when the offensive line wasn't necessarily giving up sacks, they were getting pushed back into the pocket, which then Dak either has to escape, but the Panthers did a pretty good job of containing, or Dak's going to have to try to just quickly get rid of it to a checkoff that he knows is going to be safe. So, for Dak, it wasn't a great game. If you're a Cowboys fan right now, first off, before we go more into this, grab your panic button, put it to the side for now. Don't hit it yet. It's week 1. Has a really good team they played. It's going to be one of the best defensive teams they're going to play all year long, especially with Luke Kuechly healthy. Which, by the way, Luke Kuechly absolutely dominated the game. That dude is an animal. He was everywhere.
He dominates every game.
Every single play he affected. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame level linebacker if he can stay healthy. But, I mean, Dak, it was a mixture. I actually really liked what I saw from Gallup on film. I mean, he's exactly what I watched, from his college game film. He knows how to get open. He doesn't let press coverage bother him. He just knows how to flow with the quarterback. I thought, was the best, and by that, what I mean is he seemed to do the best out of all the receivers of when Dak was scrambling, trying to make time. He seemed to be the only one that moved with Dak, the only one who was trying to get open when Dak moved. I was really disappointed in the other receivers that seemed to just kind of stand still when Dak was moving the pocket. That's one thing when Romo was in his prime, the receivers did so well, was when Romo was buying time and moving, they moved and then got open, and then Romo would make the throw. The receiving corps did not do that in this game, and I think that's going to be important for them to do as the year moves on. I also think it's going to be important play calling wise. Use Dak's mobility. Call some more read options. Get him on some rollouts. Get him on some sprint outs. Spread the field. When the offense was most successful, they were spreading the field. That includes the running game. Because the problem is when the Cowboys line up in what's called their 12 personnel, when you get 2 tight ends down on the line, and then every now and then they would motion the receiver in. So you would essentially have 8 guys in the box on the offensive side. They never one time, Tanner, ran a play action out of that formation. So whenever they were in that formation, the Panthers did not respect that the Cowboys were going to even try to pass the ball. And when you're doing that, nothing good is going to happen. And there was too many plays as well on third down and 6, for instance. Let's not even talk about the third down and 10 plus, because you can't put yourself in that situation. Third down and 6. How many guys do you want out running routes, Tanner?
Oh, probably 4 or 5.
At least 4, right?
At least a minimum of 4.
So the Cowboys would have 2 guys running routes that actually went past the first down marker, and then 1 guy who would be running basically the checkoff route. I mean, I just didn't understand the play calling through a lot of this game, and there was definitely missed executions. The first play of the game should have been a touchdown if the offensive line and Dak would have made the call at the line, because all they had to do was see that there was a huge gap, and it was obvious that the defensive end was going to stunt over. If they would have done that, it would have allowed the fullback to get up to linebacker level. The center would have taken over the nose guard. The guard would have gone straight to linebacker. The tackle would have taken off the end, and there would have been a huge hole for Zeke to just run for a touchdown. I saw a breakdown of it on Twitter, and it was obvious. And so I'm not pressing the panic button on this offense yet. I still think they're going to be okay, but you want to see better play calling from the offense coordinator, and you want to see better execution from the players. And also a point, a lot of people have been talking about that Blake Jarwin misthrow by Dak, and I know I talked about it. That was on both parties. That was also Jarwin's fault. Dak was scrolling out to his left. Jarwin stopped on his route, and so Dak threw it where he was, but right when Dak threw it, Jarwin took off running. It was a miscommunication on both sides.
It's just bad communication, right? And you see that from every team, especially in week 1. You see that with literally every team. Even Brady and his receivers, and Brady and Gronk have done that and made that same mistake in week 1.
So before everyone starts, I mean, Dak. Let me say this, because I do like Dak, and I know I'm gonna but I kind of have to defend him in some ways because everyone else is just trashing him without looking at the film. You can't forget, if you're not looking at the coach's film where you get a view of the whole field, you're not seeing the entire play. You're not getting to see what actually happened. And so for,
Right.
fans who go on social media and overreact and kind of, you mentioned it, and now, getting on the final point, you talked about Connor Williams. Connor Williams had one of the better performances on the offensive line if you take the full body of work in. He would have graded out, and I didn't do grades for all the offensive linemen. I would like to in the future. I just didn't have the time. I'd say he would have graded out around an 82, 83. I actually thought Connor Williams played really well. The problem was his 2 or 3 bad plays really stood out, and they caused, big plays for the defense in 2 sacks and then a big hit on the quarterback as well. So, but other than that, I thought Connor Williams, for the front he was having to go against in his first start, Connor Williams showed why we drafted him where we did. And I think he's going to, strengthen up as the season goes on. He's going to strengthen up over the offseason because that's his only problem. His footwork is phenomenal. He just needs to get a little bit stronger, a little bit bigger, and he has a chance to really fit right in with this stacked offensive line. Joe Looney, I'm just going to kind of go across the whole offensive line because that's the position I understand the best. And if you have questions, Tanner, just chime in.
Yeah, well, I was already curious about this offensive line with there being 2 new starters and not having Travis Frederick and how the middle of that line. So I did watch a lot of the middle of the line. I didn't watch too much on the bookends with Collins and Smith.
Right. So, yeah, the middle of the offensive line you can summarize pretty quickly. Joe Looney, he played good. The problem is Travis Frederick is great, and Travis Frederick is the quarterback of your offensive line. So you missed Travis Frederick on getting to that second level and essentially taking out 2 levels of the field. Travis Frederick's so good, he clears the first level and the second level in a matter of seconds. Joe Looney is not going to have that ability. He's just not Travis Frederick. That's where you miss him blocking.
Well, he's not athletic
exactly.
enough.
And then you miss him with, offensive, pre-snap calls. Frederick was the quarterback of that offensive line. Zach Martin, he's Zach Martin. He played great. I mean, he's just ridiculous. He's
the best player on the entire team.
He's the best offensive guard in the NFL. The only player on the team who gives Zach Martin a run for his money right now is DeMarcus Lawrence. That's how good DeMarcus Lawrence is playing.
Right. It's Zach Martin, DeMarcus Lawrence, and then probably Sean Lee.
Now let's get to the reason why I'm not pressing the panic button on this Cowboys team. Lael Collins and Tyron Smith are not going to play that bad every week. They are not going to play that bad again this year. They are not that type of players. Lael Collins, after he struggled early in the year last year, was grading out in the final 6 games as the best offensive lineman for the Cowboys. Lael Collins is going to be fine. He struggled. They both committed stupid penalties. They both just looked kind of out of whack, kind of like, Lael Collins got hurt in the preseason, missed a lot of practice, missed preseason games. Tyron Smith missed a lot of practice because they were being safe with him, missed all the preseason because they were being safe with him. They look like guys, and I don't care if you're an all-pro, you need to have game speed time in the preseason. And I'm not blaming the Cowboys for it. I would have done it the same way they did, but they clearly showed rust. And you can't show rust against a front 7 like the Carolina Panthers have. So I'm not pressing the panic button yet on this Cowboys team. I think they're going to go out. I think they're going to beat the Giants. I think they're going to look better. I think the offense is never going to look like a top 5 offense, but I think they have a chance to at least be what we need them to be a decent team this year and be, like I predicted, around a 10-6 team. And I expect better play all around in the Giants game. And the only way I'll start to panic is if it just looks like Tyron Smith is starting a decline in his career. If it looks like Lael Collins isn't what I expect him to be, because their performances in week 1 were those 2 and Sean Lee were the 3 most disappointing performances on the team. And those are the 3 guys that I don't expect to disappoint like that again.
Yeah, and another thing is with the Giants, they're such a bad matchup for the Cowboys because their strengths defensively is what might be what their weakness is for the Cowboys offensively this year. Janoris Jenkins has always given us trouble. Ever since Jenkins has been a Giant, he has given us fits. Landon Collins is a great safety. So those 2 guys really do a good job against the Cowboys, and where the receiving core is not necessarily the strength of this team. And then the inside line, the edge rushers don't bother me. The linebackers don't scare me for the Giants at all, actually. It's really only – and they switched from a 4-3 to a 3-4 this year. But Damon Snacks Harrison, that guy, he gives – Frederick trouble. So I know Looney and Williams, he's going to line up right in between the 2 of them, and he's going to go and take up Looney and Connor Williams on a double team pretty much all game long for those 2. They're going to have their hands full. But again, the Giants are, they're a good matchup. But however, I think our defense this year is the one time where this is the best defense that Eli Manning has had to play against the Dallas Cowboys, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Poor Connor Williams, man, because he's going to get flack from the fans because he's going to have one or two bad plays in this game, just like he did in Carolina. The problem is you got to look at the full body of work, and it's really unfair. How about that? You're a rookie coming in the NFL, and the first two defensive fronts you got to play is the Carolina Panthers and the New York Giants. That's rough, but I mean, we'll see. Next week's going to be interesting. It's not a must-win, but it's about as close to a must-win as you can get for your second game of the season because you have the Seattle Seahawks on the road in Game 3. And so it's really important for the Cowboys to bounce back this week because if they don't, you almost have to hit the panic button even if you believe in this team because you can't start out 0-3. Even 0-2 is hard enough to dig out of. But, I'm still hopeful for this Cowboys team. I'm not going to give up yet. As bad as they looked, they lost by one possession on the road to a playoff team.
Yeah, and that's really what it really comes down to is the result of the game wasn't nearly as bad as people make it seem like on the internet. It makes it seem like we were the Buffalo Bills and got blown out by a mediocre non-playoff team a year ago in the Baltimore Ravens. And so, I mean, that's the price of being a Cowboys fan. That's the price of everybody hating you. And we're on to next week. We're on to Cincinnati, as Bill Belichick would say. And, like I said at the beginning of the year, during the offseason, after the draft, before we were doing this show, was Dallas could be a 4-win team or Dallas could be an 11-win team. It just depends. And what I think it depends a lot on, it's not the players. It's not how they play. It's about their discipline and the offensive play calling for Scott Linehan and Jason Garrett. I think that defense is set. I don't see us having a lot of problems unless we catch the injury bug like we usually do. And other than that, I like this Cowboys team. There are still questions left unanswered. But Jake, thank you so much for putting all that work in. It's a lot of work on your part, and it takes up a lot of your free time. And so I appreciate it, and I know the fans are going to appreciate what you did today, too.
Yeah, and it's something I'm going to organize a little bit better in the future, where I'm going to, spotlight a few players. I have ideas of what I want to do with it moving forward, so I know I kind of jumped around this time. It's going to get more structured. It's going to get more organized as I get used to doing it. I kind of want to act as a scout, basically, in this segment, and so if anyone has questions that they want me to look at on film in the next week, shoot them over to me and I'll do so. And also, quick trivia question, Tanner. Last time the Cowboys went 0-4 in the preseason, then lost their first game of the regular season and looked horrible. What was their record?
12-4.
Yes. Don't panic.
Yeah, I knew that one because that was the year Tony Romo got second place in the MVP race, and it was the Dez Bryant catch that was later, or no catch, that was later called a catch against the Green Bay Packers. Trust me, I remember it very vividly. That was the only year I really thought the Cowboys were going to make a Super Bowl, and it didn't happen. But, hey, thanks for everybody for listening again. That is going to do it for the Fanboys. We are the fans, talking as fans for the fans. And, again, keep sharing us, keep spreading the word, and we'll be back next week. Thank you, and good night. I got Fitzmagic in me, coming on the Saints secondary. Fitzmagic, magic, magic, Fitzmagic, magic, magic. I got Fitzmagic in me, coming on the Saints secondary. Fitzmagic, magic, magic, Fitzmagic, magic, magic. I got Fitzmagic in me, coming on the Saints secondary. Fitzmagic, magic, magic, Fitzmagic, magic, magic.